The heat lay like a hand upon Sunspear, not the slap of a tempest but the steady touch of a lover who knew the curve of every yellow stone and every line of shadow along the courtyards. Sand sifted through the lanes and gathered in the corners where the courtyard tiles dipped from centuries of slippered feet. A lizard skittered along the foundation of a colonnade and disappeared into a crack where damp kept the dust clinging to the stone. The air smelled of brine and baked citrus peel and the faint, persistent iron of rust from spearheads. Canvas awnings breathed and flattened with the weak sea breeze, their edges fluttering like the lashes of sleepy eyes. Oberyn Martell stood in a circle of shade beneath a fig tree whose leaves were as large as a man's hand. He balanced the spear in his palm, feeling the center of its weight. The ashwood shaft was as familiar to him as laughter. He let it tilt until it threatened to roll off his skin and caught it again with an absent twist of the wrist. The point was dull today, capped with a padded bulb for sparring, a concession to the bruised ribs of the guardsmen he had humiliated before midday. A bead of sweat moved down his temple, pausing on the high ridge of his cheekbone as if to consider its route, then carried on along the strong line of his jaw. Ilaria Sand lounged on a low bench with a shallow bowl of pomegranates between her knees, breaking the ruby berries with her thumbs and bringing the sweet sharpness to her mouth. "If I were a fig," she said lazily, watching him, "I would fall from my branch and roll to your feet to be chosen and bitten. You would bruise yourself to be devoured?" Oberyn asked without looking over, testing the spear with a slow downward press, feeling the flecks run from wood into sinew and up to his shoulder. "I would bruise myself to be noticed," Ilaria said, "though I do not much need to bruise for that." She tipped a handful of seeds toward the lizard. It was bolder than she expected. It hauled itself a finger's length from the crack, accepted the offering by licking one bright seed, and retreated again with stately caution. The courtyard at this hour held only the three of them: the prince with his spear, the paramour with her pomegranates, and Areo Hota in the far arch, a silent tower of a man, his beard salt at the edges. The captain's long axe leaned against his shoulder, but seldom did he grip his weapon without need. The man's stillness did not feel like idleness. It felt like the moment between a drawn breath and a spoken word. Oberyn flicked the spear up and caught it. The padded tip snapped at a fly and missed. "I have been chosen and bitten often enough," he said. "Let the figs remain on their branches today." Ilaria smiled with the corners of her mouth but not her eyes. "And yet you are restless. Was there a time when I was otherwise?" "Yes," she said. "There were hours while you slept." Footfalls approached along the shaded gallery. Oberyn knew the rhythm and sank the spears but into the tile to lean upon it, the gesture more a nod than a bow. When his brother entered, the air seemed to bend around him, reshaped by the weight of care he carried in his shoulders. Prince Doran moved with deliberation. It was not merely slowness but attention. He acknowledged Areo with a glance as a man might greet his shadow. "We've had another letter," Doran said to Oberyn before settling his bulk upon a cushioned chair. He breathed as if the room were built too high upon the world and the air here was thin. Ilaria wiped her fingers on a strip of linen and rose to pour cool water into a glazed cup, passing it to the Prince of Dorne with a respectful dip of her head. Doran thanked her and drank. "The world is thick with letters," Oberyn said. "It grows into a forest of them, and some of us are too impatient to count the rings." "This is a letter from the sea," Doran said gently. "Such waters do not often write, and when they do, they can be cruel with their salt." Oberyn smiled slightly. "Then read me the tide, brother." Doran held the folded parchment but did not unfurl it. "Rumors of the East come to us as songs sung at night, notes carried on winds that pick up dust and leave footprints in places we did not think had floors. She is real. That she is real has not been in doubt," Oberyn said. He finally let his eyes slide toward Ilaria and then to Areo, making the circle of knowledge explicit. "Dragons either are or are not. It would be a cruel trick of the gods to let men burn at rumor." Doran's fingers smoothed the paper. "Real and seated in a city of brick pyramids, where once a bronze harpy watched the bay. They say she tore it down with her own hands, though I suspect more hands were involved. She holds court, She frees slaves. She inclines her head to the petitions of those whom no one has listened to except the men who priced them. She has advisors, fewer each season by the looks of it. She has a temper and an affection for being told the truth, as if it were a strange fruit she has not tasted enough times and cannot bring herself to despise. And the dragons, Ilaria said. The word lay between them like a bright shard. Even speaking it seemed rash. They are small, yet they are not small, Doran answered. All infants are small until they break a man's world by calling him father. Oberyn's smile deepened without kindness. There are fathers whose worlds want breaking. Dragons, Doran repeated, and his slow voice made the word into a measured footfall descending a long staircase. 3. If one believes all we hear. Ilaria set the bowl of fruit aside and leaned forward, forearms bare, the cords of her wrists slender and strong. And your letter says what? That she would have a friend. It says she does not know we exist, Doran said, but his eyes were upon Oberyn's. Or she has not chosen to look in our direction yet. The east has rarely chosen to look west when the west is burning, Oberyn said. He let go of the spear and stepped closer to his brother, the grin gone. You could have sent him years ago. Doran shook his head. He was not ready. He is still not ready. Then send me, Oberyn said, and the courtyard held its breath for a moment. A gull cried beyond the parapet. In another corner of Sunspear, a child laughed and then cried, the sounds not very far apart. Ilaria looked at him as if a breeze had lifted a veil she had known would lift one day and had not wished to name the day. Ario's eyes did not flicker, but his hand repositioned slightly upon the haft of his long axe. Less a guard and more a settling in of a tree to a heavier wind. You have a garden full of children, Doran said, and there was no censure in it, only affection and worry. You have duties that look more like pleasures, but which are duties nonetheless. You have enemies in the west who will rejoice if one of our snakes hisses beyond their reach. And you have a way with saying the precise thing to the precise person that will make them do precisely what you want. That last is an argument for sending me, Oberyn said. It is also an argument for keeping you where you can whisper in the ears I already know the shape of. Ilaria moved to stand at Oberyn's shoulder. Her fingers brushed the inside of his elbow. If you go because you must, not because your brother commands it, she said softly. She could feel the quickness in him as a musician feels a string tense beneath the pressure of a tuning peg. If you go because of a silver-haired girl who lost everything and because of another who lost more. Oberyn's mouth flattened. He loved easily and fought easily, but he was not careless about the weight of certain names. Elia still visited him in the cool hours before dawn, as she always would, not as a ghost with hunger but as a presence he wore under his ribs, a grief he had learned to breathe around as a man learns to breathe around a wound. He was bones and salt and heat and promise. He had made more promises than was wise and kept enough of them to feel the cost. Our house's motto is patient and dry, like a caution spoken by a mother to children who would run toward a well with their hands out, he said. And yet water knows it must move. We are sand. We shift. Doran's eyes closed briefly as though to seal in the ache there. He opened them again and nodded once, a very small bow to fate. Go then, he said, not as a supplicant, not as a threat, as a hand extended from a far shore to a woman who has walked barefoot on too many hot roads. And if she bites the hand? Oberyn asked lightly. Then you will bring the hand back when it is wiser, Doran said. And you will tell me if she is the river our thirst deserves. Ariohoda drew in a slow and quiet breath. I will arrange the ship, he said. Oberyn looked at Ilaria, and in his gaze a dozen conversations unfolded without words. Trust, desire, memory, the knowledge that he would go whether she asked him not to and the knowledge that she would not ask him not to. He lowered his head and kissed her forehead once, the bone beneath warm, the skin smelling faintly of pomegranate and sun. Bring me something from the edge of the world, she said. Not a trinket. Taste. Something that will not keep. He smiled again, and this one reached his eyes. I will bring you a story. The ship's hull creaked like an old joint bending. The sails were the tan of cured skin, patched in places with squares of deeper brown. The captain was a Tyroshi who wore his beard dyed the blue of bruised plums and his pride dyed no color at all. He bowed to Oberyn with the particular eagerness of a man used to bending to those who could pay. Ilaria and Doran saw him off from the quayside. Doran's hand was on the rail because the weight of the wharf made his cane unnecessary, and Aereo hovered behind him like a second shadow, larger and more patient. The deck smelled of pitch and sun-warmed rope. The sailors were lean and brown, moving with the economy of men who let the ship go about her own business and only interfered where necessary. Oberyn lay on his back for a long hour after departure, his hands folded behind his head, watching the triangular slice of the sail cut the sky into a geometry he found pleasant. He closed his eyes and imagined the map he had carried in his mind since he was young. The southern shore of Dorne like a lip, the stepstones scattered like careless coins, the free cities to the north and east, the black mouth of the Rhoyne yawning from its silt and jungle. Across that river he had loved and fought and learned and lost. He had once believed he understood the world by moving through it quickly. He had since come to understand there were intimacies only slowness revealed. He spent the days in a rhythm of watching and talking, drilling with his spear on the foredeck during the hour when the sun was neither a mercy nor a tyrant. He found himself asking the cook questions about the markets of Tyrosh and when the oranges came cheapest and which salt did the fish prefer. He asked the captain about winds and why the sea had humors like a human, some days sullen, some days frisky, some days torpid as a cat after cream. He learned the names of half the crew and the loves and debts of a quarter, and knew by the end of the first week which two were cousins and which two were enemies and who would sing when he thought himself unobserved. At night he leaned upon the stern rail and fixed his eyes to the line where black water and black sky bit each other. Stars fell and were replaced. Once, near the stepstones, a pod of dolphins came, silvered by starlight, their backs arcing in a steady pageant that felt like reassurance. He thought of his daughters and how the sea would carry stories to them faster than letters ever could, the stories changing shape each time a man used his tongue to pass them on. He dared which version of him would arrive at Meereen before he did. Tyrosh's harbor was a shout of color and a fatigue of smells. He did not linger. He had no wish to be recognized in places where recognition came with too many hands. A day later, Lys floated past like a perfumed dream, bright pavilions and courtesans who measured out smiles and coin. The captain asked if they might take on a better class of wine, and Oberyn laughed and said yes, and tasted it later with the genuine curiosity of a student. He liked the wine but did not trust it to taste the same twice. It seemed the sort of wine that would be faithful for 3 sips and then become someone else, a creature with a different mouth. He lay awake and listened to the sea talk to the hull. He spoke to Ilaria in his mind, telling her about a fish with a spine like a saw and a vendor who sold salt from 6 different places and insisted he could taste the stones of the mountains from which it was scraped. He told her about a woman who tried to read his future and how he had refused, politely, saying he preferred to discover his future the way one discovers whether a fruit is ripe, by biting it. In Volantis they took on water and a story. A freedman in a patched tunic that had once been part of a banner, green with traces of yellow, sat on a coil of rope and coughed as if his lungs were a fireplace losing its last logs. He had a brand on his cheek that someone had tried to mar with ash to make it less proud. "Queen of the Bay," he said when he heard the name Daenerys. "She is a girl, and she is a mountain, and she is a storm, and she is a child. All at once. The men in their tiger masks hate her because she is something they cannot buy. She freed the men whose backs they used as benches. Some of those men do not know what to do with their knees when they are not bent. They wobble like foals. But they are learning there is a way to stand that is not waiting to be struck." "You were there?" Oberyn asked, passing him a strip of dried meat. "I was in Astapor," the man said, and his voice softened on the name as if it were a father he had loved and hated. "I was made to break other men because I was good at it. She chose to break us in a different way. Some of us are better for it. Some of us are broken into sharp pieces and do sharp things with ourselves as if we were knives looking for hands. She is a girl and she is a mountain," he repeated. The words seemed to warm him. He shivered and smiled at nothing. I would like to see a day where she is only a woman, nothing else. That would mean the world had changed. Oberyn thanked him and set a coin beside him, which the man ignored until Oberyn moved away. The captain wiped his hands on his breeches and leaned upon the rail and told a story of 3 merchants who had presented the queen with gold and chains to buy her goodwill, and how she had given the gold to a temple and traded the chains for grain to feed people who did not pray to that god. The captain was not sure whether the story was true. He was sure of how it made him feel. That was often enough for men. As they rounded the black cliffs of the Gisker coast, the sea grew dirtier with silt, the color of old bruises. The smell of rot tickled the back of the throat, not entirely unpleasant if one had known cellars and storerooms all one's life. The city came into view as a series of stacked triangles. The toppled harpy lay in pieces on a quay. Brass was green where it had wept the sea's tears, and children climbed its sinking fin as if it were a hill baked into metal. Men with pale eyes and sparse beards watched the ship's mast with narrowed faces as if suspicious of the wood itself. At the harbor master's hut, a bored functionary held out his hand without looking, and the captain filled it and passed on with only a small adjustment to the ship's ledger. Oberyn dressed with care, not for grandeur but for message. He chose a robe of light linen dyed a terracotta that honored Sunspear's stone and trimmed simply in thread the color of old gold. At his breast he fixed the sun and spear of his house, small and plain. He bound his hair back and left his feet in thin shoes. The city felt like a place where showing the shape of one's step was a kind of honesty. He took a short spear capped with a blunt, gleaming ferrule. It was more walking staff than threat, but the implication drew a neat line in the air between courtesy and capability. He was met at the foot of the gangplank by a youth whose skin was the slick brown of polished wood and whose eyes had a steadiness that made him look older. The boy wore a simple tunic belted with string and carried nothing but a name woven into his posture. "I am Grey Worm," he said in rough Valyrian, each word placed with care. "The Queen waits. Prince Oberyn Martell of Dorne," Oberyn replied in a smoother Valyrian accented by long years and longer roads. "I do not speak as prettily as your city, but I speak enough to greet the Queen in her mother's tongue." Grey Worm inclined his head. "The Queen speaks many tongues," he said, and there was a flick of pride in it that did not belong to him alone. "This way, you will be searched at the door. It is the rule for all men." "I would be worried if the rule were otherwise," Oberyn said and followed. Meereen smelled of cinnamon and old blood, of dates left too long in a bowl and the tannins of cured leather. Dogs slept in the heat and blinked at the shadows from beneath heavy lids. The avenues were wide, built to accommodate parades meant to impress the slaves who lined them. The harpy that had stood at the bay's mouth had been one of many. Smaller sisters had been chipped from rooftops or decapitated crudely, and in places the empty plinths gaped like mouths resolved to say nothing more. They passed petitioners sitting on woven mats and men whispering in doorways whose mouths were shirked with fine linen and whose hands were clean in a way that made Oberyn distrust them. Children shyly pressed small fists of flowers and dusty figs into Grey Worm's hand as if he were a shrine. Grey Worm took the offerings without smile or impatience. He moved like a man who had learned to weigh how much of himself the world would try to take and how much he could give it without dissolving. At the base of the Great Pyramid, the air cooled as if carried by the stone, and Oberyn felt his skin change, the small prickles of sweat drying on his forearms. A woman waited there with her back very straight and her hands folded. Her hair was a dark gold, less a sun than a memory of wheat in a northern field, and the skin around her eyes held the lines of a person who had smiled and worried in equal measures. She was dressed in a pale robe that made her look like a clean scrap of cloud hung to dry against the stone. "Ser Barristan Selmy," she said in the common tongue, the consonants a little truer than most Meereenese and the vowels shaped by familiarity with a different court entirely. "The Queen's advisor. You are welcome, Your Highness." "Ser Barristan," Oberyn said, and let softness into the formal address because both of them understood it was not a meeting of strangers. "You are far from your white cloak." Barristan's eyes flickered with something that did not reach his mouth. "Far from many things," he agreed. but not far from the work of my years, which remains the same. Oberyn allowed himself the smallest tilt of his head in respect to both man and history. The searchers at the door were brisk and thorough. One of them touched the ferrule of his spear with reverent fingers as if absorbing its message through skin. He stepped past them into a dim hall where the air felt like water had only recently left it. She sat on a low chair that had cost too many grown hands too many hours. It was the right height to make those who stood before her consider kneeling and then refuse. Her hair was pale as long-spun flax and braided simply, not like a bride but like a rider. She wore no crown, only a circlet of simple metal that caught the light and threw it back without trying to impress. 2 rings of guards formed careful circles with space for echoes. Missandei of Noth stood at her right shoulder with a tablet in her hands, the wax already scarred by words. Oberyn of House Martell, Missandei announced. The name went out into the room and settled on the stone like a bird with folded wings. Daenerys Targaryen's eyes were the clear, lambent blue of deep sky after rain. They did not look like the eyes of the men who ruled in masks here, or the eyes of men used to counting coin. They looked like water that had learned fire and not regretted the education. She did not smile. "Welcome to Meereen," she said in the common tongue. Her accent had shed much of its old stiffness, the vowels lengthened by the rhythms of a dozen languages passing through her mouth each day. "I have not had a prince of Dorne in my hall. I have had men from Dorne, but they were not princes. Princes are simply men who have inherited an extra word," Oberyn replied. "I thank you for receiving me." "You expected me to?" she asked, and her tone was neither sharp nor mild. It tasted of inquiry more than challenge. "I expected you to do whatever struck you as useful," he said. "You do not waste hours. I admire that." "You cannot yet admire what you have not seen," she said. The corner of her mouth quirked, not to soften the reply but to mark it as only half serious. "Why are you here?" He looked around briefly as if to confirm that the stone walls were listening, and then let the still room hear him. "For a woman whose name I can say without spitting," he said. "For a sister who had no dragons. For a house that owes yours and a debt we are not ashamed to admit. For a world that seems to have gotten used to the wrong mouths calling themselves kings. For the pleasure of speaking to someone who is not afraid to be young where everyone wishes her to be a symbol." Ser Barristan's breath made a quiet sound through his nose. Missandei's stylus did not move. Grey Worm's eyes were angles. Daenerys's fingers flexed on the arm of her chair. "You have brought many reasons," she said. "Sometimes a man brings too many reasons because none of them is quite true on its own." "All of them are true at once," Oberyn said gently. "Truths do not always like to travel alone." "And what does Prince Doran say to such travel?" she asked. His name in her mouth did not sound like a stranger's. Oberyn's expression altered in a way that might have been visible only to people who had watched him for years. "My brother speaks softly and feels deeply and remembers everything that matters and much that does not. He sends me without sending me. If you ask for letters, I have one. If you ask for a man to look at, I am here. If you ask why he did not come himself," he spread his hands. "Because he is needed where he is," Barristan murmured, and Daenerys's eyes sliced briefly to him and away in acknowledgement. "And because he has not entirely decided what he will be in the storm that is coming." "Is that what you are?" Daenerys asked Oberyn. "A storm." He smiled. "I am weather," he said. "Useful, dangerous, and temporary." She did not return the smile. "I have no lack of weather," she said. "I have a lack of boats, of grain that stays in sacks instead of vanishing into the hands that should carry it, of men who are patient and fierce at once, of counsel that is not afraid of my dragons but not in love with them either." "I have no dragons," Oberyn said, "but I have eaten from enough tables to know the taste of rot before the meat turns black. I know how to listen to men who think they are hiding, and I know how to tell girls things their fathers won't. I can find the cracks in walls, and I am polite about pointing them out. If I speak when I should not, you may have me thrown out. If I speak when I uld, you may ask me for more." Her face did not soften, but the set of her shoulders altered as if she had shifted a weight from one side to the other. "Why would Dorne help me?" she asked. "Apart from the reasons you have already given that are heavy with old grief." "Because we remember," he said. "Because we have done the work of making the sun cross the sky 1 inch at a time in a land where water is more precious than gold and men who have water are sometimes fools. Because the West thinks the South is a bare heel to be stepped on, and we have grown used to stepping sideways. Because we like to choose our own marriages, including those between sand and flame." She tilted her head. "You propose a marriage. I propose an alliance," he said. "What form alliances take when they are hungry is a question we can discuss over wine." "Might the wine be poisoned?" she asked, and the court tittered, not because it was brave but because it was expected. "If it is, you will detect it because your nose is better than mine," he said, stone dry. "And you will drink it anyway to prove something, and your dragon will be angry at me, and then we will have a different problem." She looked at him as if he had scratched a chalk line on the floor between them. The line was not a threat. It was a jump rope for children and a measure for those who wished to cut cloth. Finally she nodded. "So you would advise me. You would sit and watch and wage quiet wars in hallways. You would be what my enemies accuse me of being, new. I would be old in the ways I must," he said. "And I would be new where it helps. And what do you ask in return? That you burn the right things," he said. And for the first time his voice carried the scratch of a blade on stone. "That when you look west you see not simply a throne shaped like a monster but a long scar across a continent and the hands that made it. That you trust a little where it costs you and doubt where it would be sweet not to. And that you speak the name Elia as if it matters." Her lips parted. The room's air changed. Missandei lowered her eyes as if to show respect to a word. Barristan's mouth tightened almost imperceptibly. "I know that name, Prince," Daenerys said at last, and the way she formed the final T was an injury and a tribute both. "If I did not know it before, Ser Barristan would have taught it to me." "All names are taught," Oberyn said. "The question is by whom?" She stood then, not as a performance but as a choice. The rings on her fingers flashed briefly. "You will stay in the guest quarters. You will attend me when I hear petitions. You will see the city as it is when men are watching and as it is when men are not. We will eat together when the wind is right and perhaps when it is not. Grey Worm will see you settled. Missandei, arrange for a place for the Dornish prince where the roof does not leak." "It never leaks," Missandei said in a voice that could have been dry if it were not careful. "We will make it leak if he wishes." The Unsullied shifted with the precision of a thought conducted down a line of nerves. Oberyn bowed from the waist, not very deeply, and left his eyes on hers while he did so. She did not look away, and his smile when he straightened was for her and the game they had agreed to play. The rooms they gave him were cool and smelled faintly of limes. Sunlight lay across the floor like the coast of a familiar map he had not walked in years, the border of a shadow that would change its shape while seeming the same. Grey Worm escorted him in with a soldier's courtesy and a boy's slight awkwardness, though there was nothing of boyhood in the respect his men paid him. Oberyn watched them go through their drills in the courtyard below while a maid poured water into a basin and waited with lowered eyes for his nod before leaving. When she had gone, he stepped to the balustrade. The city sprawled like a great animal sleeping on one flank, its breathing slow and dusty. Beyond it, the bay was an expanse of tarnished metal, beaten by a sun that seemed indifferent to whether it warmed skin or roofs. Down there, two men argued, their bodies bent in toward each other like reeds in a tight wind. A child squatted at their feet and poked at something small and dead with a stick. A woman shook a blanket, and dust rose from it in a gold cloud and settled on her hair like praise. "Your face is not easy to read from a distance," said a voice behind him. Ser Barristan had entered as quietly as a thought one refuses to entertain and finds in one's head anyway. Oberyn did not turn. "I suppose that is part of the point. Do you still hold a sword when no one is looking?" Oberyn asked. "I hold myself," Barristan said simply. "Swords are temporary." Oberyn glanced back then. "You have given her good counsel?" "I have given her the counsel I have," Barristan said. I am old enough to know what I do not know. It is not fashionable knowledge among soldiers." Oberyn nodded and looked back at the city. "She is younger than I thought and older than she looks." "That is how age often works," Barristan replied. "She will listen to me because she listens to everyone," Oberyn said. "And she will ignore me because she has learned her own ear. I do not mind being ignored by someone who is trying." Barristan's mouth softened, and for an instant the weight of his years seemed a cloak he might shrug off. "You are not the man I expected. Most men are not when one stands at the right angle," Oberyn said. He traced a finger along a crack in the stone of the balustrade. Someone had tried to repair it badly. "My brother wanted to send a boy," he added, and this time he did not look at Barristan's face when he said it. "I told him boys make wonderful offerings to hard gods. He has given enough of those." "Yes," Barristan said, and the word was an old scar touched with the pad of a thumb. They stood in easy silence for a time. A dragon's Shah. Dao passed across the far wall, an arrow of darkness that startled a pair of pigeons from their perch. Oberyn felt the hair on his forearms lift as if the creature's proximity were a wind that did not touch the air. He did not bother to look up. The balcony's roof overhang would not admit a dome of sky large enough to frame something like that. Ilaria entered his thoughts without requiring an invitation. He imagined telling her about the shadow and the way it felt, how it carried not only weight but a strange kind of gravity that seemed to draw a person's mind upward against his will. He imagined her laughter at that, how she would tell him he had always been drawn to things that could drop him from a height. He slept and woke and ate and walked the city. He watched Daenerys sit her court and learned how long she allowed a man to speak before stopping him when something in what he said began to circle rather than move forward. He found the corners of the room where voices lost their bite, where men relaxed because they thought they were behind her attention. He measured Missandei's small, precise corrections and the way Grey Worm's presence changed the posture of men who were not often in rooms with men who would not be bribed. He watched which merchants came twice in a week and which came not at all. He watched how the freedmen knelt sometimes not because they were used to it but because gratitude had yet to learn any other posture. At the end of a long morning, when the room smelled of stale sweat and the queen's patience had thinned to muslin, an overseer with a carefully oiled beard and a white robe approached, his hands empty. He named 4 men who had once belonged to him and said they had returned to break his windows and steal his bread and ruin his wife's linen. He spoke honeyed words about forgiveness and restitution, and there was a space within the words measured to receive the coin he expected from the throne. "Have you proof of your claims?" Daenerys asked. She looked very tired when she said it, and the weariness did not make her soft. "I have this," the overseer said, sliding forward a broken shoe with a strip of leather missing from its heel, a child's toy with a chipped wheel, a tear in a sheet which he held up as if it were an affidavit. "How do these prove the men you named were the ones who did this?" she asked. "They are mine," he said simply. "The way men do who have not had anything taken from them, they did not steal back twice over. The men were mine, the shoe was my son's, the toy was carved by my grandfather, the sheet belonged to my wife. The men were mine and now they are not, but they still take from me." Daenerys sat very still. The hall watched the air around her. "I cannot pay every man for his broken things," she said. "I am trying to make a city where fewer things are broken." "This is not possible," the overseer said. He spread his hands, genuinely bewildered. "Things break. Slaves break. Wives break. Perhaps you should buy stronger things," Oberyn murmured where he stood at the edge of the hall. Missandei's stylus made a small, apologetic noise against wax. Daenerys's gaze flickered to Oberyn and back to the plaintiffs. "If the men took from you, they should be punished," she said. "But you must bring evidence more than these. You must bring men who saw and are not also your cousins." "Is there such evidence?" The overseer hesitated. "They have cousins," he said at last, as if forced into an admission. "Many cousins." Missandei's mouth bent downward like the edge of a leaf weighed by rain. "The court requires names," she said formally. "They will not give me their names," the overseer said. "Then I cannot give you my justice," Daenerys said. You are not used to hearing no. Practice. He flinched as if the word were a thrown object. He withdrew with small bows that might have been contempt disguised as custom. As he passed, he let his gaze slide over Oberyn like a blade drawn over whetstone. The scrape was not entirely metaphor. Oberyn smiled at him without warmth, a smile that said, "I have been cut before and remained myself." Later, alone with her small circle, Daenerys paced the narrow balcony that ran along the pyramid's inner wall. "Every hour feels like an argument with a potter," she said. "He wants clay and a dry kiln and no heat and to be paid twice. Can a potter have no heat?" Missandei asked gently. "He can have a little," Daenerys said. Her hands were small and square-palmed. They looked like hands that would have learned quickly to hold reins or a child. "A small heat that does not crack the pot. I am asked for this small heat, again and again. And sometimes," Oberyn said, "you are asked to sit in the kiln." She looked at him over her shoulder, and for once there was humor open on her face. "Often," she said after a breath, "it is my own will that asks me to sit in the kiln. Even gods get tired of worshipping themselves," he said. "You are not a god. Let yourself be tired for a watch." She stopped walking then and came back to lean on the parapet. "It is easy to admire a girl who burns down something cruel and then leaves," she said quietly. "It is less charming to watch her stay and quarrel with brick. You and I have never been charming," he said. "Even when we tried." She studied him. "You tried. Once," he said. "The man died anyway." Her laugh was reluctant and a little wild. "If I keep you," she said, "the men who do not like me will say, 'Look, now she is counseled by the prince who drinks venom and whispers to women.' Let them say it," he said. "Those men will go on saying whatever serves them. Give them what you want so you can take what you need." "I am not sure what I need." "Sand," he said. "Heat that is not fire. An alliance with a place that has learned to live without unlearning. Ships, a coastline. A promise from men who do not write their vows on wax." "I do not have enough ships," she said again, as if the admission were its own kind of confession. "You do not need enough," he said. "You need the belief among your enemies that you will have enough. Belief breaks lines more honestly than spears." She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. "Ser Barristan, you will make time to speak with the prince about what the West looks like now." "I have never stopped looking," Barristan said. "I want him to see my city," she went on, ignoring the old knight's mild protest. "Not simply its roofs but its undersides. Grey Worm, find him men who can make him less obvious when he walks at night. Not to hide him from harm," she added as Grey Worm's forehead nodded. "Only to keep him from turning every quiet doorway into a stage." Grey Worm's mouth straightened. "There are ways to make a man look like a piece of wall," he said. "I have been a piece of wall before," Oberyn said cheerfully. It was educational. That evening, after a meal of grilled lamprey that surprised him by being delicate rather than surly, he found his way to the roof of the pyramid. The stone was still warm from the day, though it had lost the sting that makes a man shift his feet. He sat with his legs folded and listened to the city unshutter itself. Dogs argued. Women poured water from jars, and the hollow sound of it hitting the bottoms of buckets echoed as if the city were a drum. Somewhere a woman sang in a minor key about the moon deciding to swim. Her voice was thick with promise and refusal. The air moved, suddenly and deliberately, and wind pressed at his shoulder not as breeze but as intention. The dragon landed 3 spear lengths away. He could not help it, he stood. The creature's head was cuneiform and gorgeously ugly, its eyes like citron stones set in a face made to break jewels. It smelled of iron and the smoke left from a burned-out fire. Its chest moved in slow, lion-heavy breaths. Scales clattered softly as it shifted, the sound like coins in a careful hand. The dragon's claws scraped the stone and left bright curls the color of a smithy's shavings. "Your name?" he asked, as if it would answer, because in some parts of the world a man is not rude to gods he does not worship. It blinked, its inner lids sliding like the gates of a private city. A voice came behind him, and he forced himself to turn slowly, refusing the impulse to stare at the thing that was not a thing. Daenerys walked barefooted, cotton trousers flowing around her as if she were an emptied sail. She touched the dragon's neck with a press of palm that was both a claim and a conversation. "Regal," she said. "He does not come when I call so much as when he decides he was about to call me." "You taught him that?" Oberyn asked. His mouth was dry. "He taught me," she said. "Drogon does not like you yet. He does not dislike you either. He has very little use for distinctions." "Men are like that," Oberyn said. "Women too." She smiled without looking at him. "You have daughters?" "Many," he said without shame, and he felt her consider him in a new light even with her eyes on her dragon. "They all have different names?" she asked. "I had no wish to name two with the same and break a mother's heart every time I called," he said. "And yet, when they stand together, I sometimes forget which is which for a beat, and the beat is always different for each of them. I knew a boy once who was a prince and had songs for breakfast," she said unexpectedly. "He would have loved your daughters and been too shy to tell them. Then he would not have had them," Oberyn said gently. "No," she said, and he felt the edge of loss there. He had names. He could give names to anyone. He had none to give himself that he could keep. The dragon settled like a ship when its anchor finds the sea floor and knows home. Daenerys stroked a place behind its jaw where the scales were finer and smelled faintly of wild herbs and ash. "If I ask you to go into the city with men who do not have names in my hall and listen for the men who call themselves sons of a thing I killed," she said, "will you go?" "I will go," he said. "If I ask you to remain outside men's houses and listen to what their wives say to each other when they do not believe men will care," she said, "will you go?" "I will go." "If I ask you to tell me when I am wrong," she said, "not with a story that tastes like a feast but with a word that tastes like old bread, will you speak?" "I will," he said. He usually lied better than this, but it seemed a good evening for honesty. She exhaled, and the dragon lifted his head and exhaled with her as if they shared a lung. "Then we will begin there," she said, "with the small work. The large work will not go away." It did not. The city had 1,000 corners where men bent their backs and tried to hide that they were doing it. Oberyn found that he could make himself into a shape that rooms ignored. He walked with Grey Worm's men along alleys that smelled of stale perfume and fish fins and peeled onions. He sat at the back of a tavern where the owner could not decide whether he was more afraid of soldiers or of men who dressed like overseers but did not drink like them. He stood under a balcony where two women spoke about their sons. One of the women had hands scarred by rope. The other's fingers were soft and ringed. They called the queen a girl and a fire and a fool and a mother in the space of 10 sentences. And their voices had the brittle zest of women who could say truths to each other and then pretend afterward that they had been talking about someone else. In a quiet courtyard, he met a man who made sandals. The man's father had carved the harpy on the house's roof and would have killed his son for offering to carve the queen's sigil instead if the old man had not already died of a cough that took his neck first. "She should have left them up there," the sandal maker said, gesturing with his awl toward the empty plinth. "We could look at what we were while we learned to be something else." "Some men think looking is hard," Oberyn said. "Some men think breathing is hard unless someone tells them when to draw and when to push," the sandal maker said, and he snorted. "I did not think I would live to see a day when I make a shoe for a man who will pay me with his own coin, even if he was once my owner's favorite dog." "What do you call that day?" Oberyn asked. "Work," the man said. He squinted at Oberyn's sandals. "Yours will last another month. Better if you carry less weight on your left foot. There is a small unevenness in you." Oberyn laughed. "We all lean." He walked with Missandei along a shaded lane while men slept against the walls with their mouths open and flies daring in and out as if their lips were beads. Missandei told him about Noth in the small voice of someone handing a stranger a cup of something too precious to spill. He did not ask about her brother because he could feel the outline of that absence the way a hand feels the slit where a bag has been cut. He asked instead about how she counted. I count in fours, she said with shy pride. When I am nervous, not to steady myself, to see if the world steadies around me. Does it? He asked, amused. Sometimes, she said. Sometimes people who are shouting begin to pause when I do not. Sometimes men's hands slow when I speak numbers in my head. Sometimes I remember my own name. That last is no small thing, he said. Oh, Missandei said, a shadow touching her mouth. My name has always been small. It is other men's names that make noise. You speak, he said, and they make an empire out of your quiet. They will anyway, she replied, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I prefer to be the one who decides which empire. In the training yard, Grey Worm taught men how to hold their fear by the throat. He did it without cruelty. He did it with demonstration and with stillness and with eyes that made a man want to become a part of a line more than he wanted to be a hero. Oberyn watched the drills and then stepped onto the beaten earth with his spear. He bowed to Grey Worm without flourish and took the posture of a student. The Unsullied's movements were clean as tools. His were liquid as water poured from a bowl. At first they seemed incompatible. Then, where the routines bent around each other, there was a grace that surprised the watching men into small whistles they tried to swallow. They sparred. Stil ran. Sweat darkened linen. Grey Worm's face remained an unreadable square, but his feet told a story of a man who loved a kind of perfection he would never arrive at and was at peace with chasing. Oberyn let himself almost lose twice, not out of condescension but because almost losing is educational. He won the third time, barely, with a turn of the wrist that had less to do with speed than with having paid attention to how the other man placed his weight when he breathed. They saluted each other with a ghost of a smile in the angle of their heads. The men watching took deeper breaths without realizing it. Barristan approached him afterward with an old knight's gait that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with injuries endured without complaint. You move as if you were always the right temperature, he said. My women complain I am sometimes too hot, Oberyn said blandly. I suppose that depends on the season, Barristan answered with a drier voice than Oberyn had expected from a man so famously upright. He took a drink of water and let a small quantity fall to the ground in the old habit of offering a gift to no god in particular. The queen asks if you will dine with her tonight. Not alone, he added when Oberyn's eyebrow lifted. She is not alone lately. She tries to make the number of men at table equal the number of rumors about her. She has found that arithmetic impossible. I have always mistrusted arithmetic, Oberyn said. The dinner was quiet. The food was simple and plentiful. The conversation was what passes for ease among people who wish to like one another and are not yet sure whether liking will be useful. Oberyn told a story about a ship in Lys that had been painted such a remarkable green the harbor birds had refused to land on it, mistaking it for a hill. Daenerys told a story about a goat that had gone missing and been returned by a dragon who had carried it halfway across the city before discovering it preferred its meat cooked. Missandei spoke without lifting her eyes about the time a woman had placed a newborn into the queen's hands and declared that now the infant had been measured it could be sold. Grey Worm did not speak. He smiled once, very small, when Oberyn said something wicked and true, and then he looked startled at himself as if he had forgotten the use of that muscle. When the meal was done, they stood in a cluster at the edge of the hall, no one quite ready to separate. Daenerys's eyes kept straying to the balcony where the night lay like velvet folded without creases. I can smell the sea, she said. The sea can smell you, Oberyn said. It is always hungry. Are you? Always, he said. He did not make the word into a weapon or an invitation. He let it be what it was. Later, in his room, he found a small object wrapped in cloth on the low table. He unwrapped it and held up a chip of weathered bronze the size of a child's tooth. There was a suggestion of a feather along one edge and a hint of a claw on the other. He smiled. Illyria had asked for something that would not keep. He closed his fist around the metal and felt its warmed from day cool on night, the metal carrying the memory of the sun into darkness. He slept with it under his pillow and dreamed that water wrote letters across his chest, and he could not read them because he had been taught to read fire first. 3 nights into his new life, Grey Worm's men led him into a house whose shut doors had not been opened in hours. There was a smell in the room of sweet rot that told him fruit had been cut here earlier, and the children had been made to lick their fingers clean, as if sugar were a sin that needed to be hidden on the tongue. A woman stood in the corner with a knife in her hand and did not recognize the knife as a thing that belonged in a kitchen. A man sat on a stool with a bloody cloth pressed to his thigh. The table was sticky where someone had spilled and wiped and left a gloss. "They will come again," the woman said in a voice as flat as a hand pressed to a hot stone. "They always come again." "What would you like me to say?" Oberyn asked. He kept his hands away from his weapons and away from his pockets and away from the woman's eyes. He let them hang for once, empty and neat. "If I knew that," she said, "I would not ask." Her eyes jumped to the shadows and made a cowed tour of the corners of her own house. "Then I will say this," he said. "You are already braver than you were when they knocked." "That bravery is like a cloth," she said, "which gets thinner each time it is wrung." "We will make it new cloth," he said, though he knew cloth could not be made new. "We will give you more." "From what?" she demanded. "From whose cupboard?" "From men who have too many sheets," he said, and the sand in him spoke then, the patient bitterness of it. "From the warehouses that only burn when their owners wish to be paid twice for their goods. From the back pockets of the men who claim to be neutral. There are more neutral men than there are harpies." She laughed once, a small, angry sound that made him like her very much. "You talk as if your mouth has teeth," she said. "It does," he said. "I try to use them for words before I use them for chewing." He went back to the pyramid and told Daenerys what he had seen and left out only some of the fear because it felt like a thing that should be kept small where possible. She listened with stillness. He told her what he thought she could do and what she could not, and when he had finished he found he had told her also what it might cost, and she did not flinch. He admired that more than he would have admired her not caring. Days bled into each other like watercolors in a dish. He sent letters west in a code that would yield itself to Doran's particular patience. He told Illyria about the sandals and the women on the balcony and the way dragons smelled and the taste of lamprey that was not surly. He told her how her name felt in his mouth at night like a fruit he would not eat because he preferred the anticipation to the eating. He told her what he had not expected, that kindness could be a weapon in a city where kindness had been priced. He told her that he was trying not to love the girl because love was messy in the wrong rooms. Once he found Barristan of an afternoon sitting on a stone step with a boy of 6 beside him, a boy whose head was shaved and whose eyes were the pale gray of a clouded morning. The boy was tying and untying a knot in a piece of rope with furious concentration. "What is he learning?" Oberyn asked. "He is learning his fingers," Barristan said. "He thinks he is learning knots." Oberyn sat next to the boy without invitation. "Tie me something that will hold a story," he said. The boy looked up at him then, measuring this brown man with his eyes. "Stories are slippery," he said. "I know," Oberyn said. "I have carried many." The boy tied. The knot was crude but honest, and Oberyn pocketed the rope and found himself stroking its roughness when he sat later on his balcony thinking of the West. He thought often of the West, not out of longing but because it lay behind him like a shadow. The Lannister lion had sunned itself for too long on the rocks of men's assumptions. The Tyrell rose had been watered with blood and perfumed with praises that would be rotten in a month. He imagined the great chair of knives and laughed at himself for caring about a thing so ugly. He did not care for it. He cared for the men who cared for it and for the men who had been broken by the caring. "Do you hate them?" Daenerys asked him once when they were alone for a quiet hour with pomegranates and salt. The juice ran down her palm and she did not mind it, only licked it away absently. "Not the way children mean when they say hate," he said. "I do not wish them dead for the pleasure of the watching. I wish them to stop being the men they are. If they cannot manage that, I wish them to be irrelevant. The world is filled with corpses that did not move anything. I have no ambition to make more." "And yet you carry a spear," she said, amused. "It is an honest tool," he said. "It tells you from a distance that you are near something sharp." like a promise. They did small work that felt like weaving a sail while the wind already filled it. They redistributed grain and disgruntled 3 petty men to the point where one attempted to bribe Oberyn in a room where the sunlight made the dust look like 1,000 small decisions. Oberyn took the bribe and then returned the bag of coin with 2 coins missing and told the man that he had paid for an armistice that would last until sundown. The man blinked, confused, and did not come back until morning, chastened in a way he could not have explained without shame. There were nights when the city held its breath and a scream rose and broke and did not echo. There were mornings when men were found with pieces of cloth tied to their arms to suggest a cause and nothing else. There were days when Daenerys' patience bled and she leaned at the parapet and stared so hard at the distance that Oberyn wondered if she had decided to walk to it. He stood beside her and did not speak, and eventually she spoke to the silence beside him, and it was as good as speaking to him. Illyria's letters found him. Thin papers that smelled of oil and dust and sometimes of the sea if the courier had an old pouch. She wrote more sparingly than he, but her words sat in his hand heavily, like fruit thick with juice. She told him of the water gardens and of how Doran had once again watched children playing at fountains with a look like pain and satisfaction. She told him that one of his daughters had bested a man who had laughed at her and she had not killed him. She told him she had passed a morning staring at a blue glass bottle and asking it to tell her if he had slept well. She told him she did not ask him not to fall in love. She asked him to remember he had a thirsty heart and that not all cups offered contained water. He folded her letters into the crack of his mattress so that his sleep smelled of her. He composed replies in his head, and in them he told her that her warning had been unnecessary, which was a charming lie. He told her that he was trying to be useful and not only beautiful, which made him snort at himself. He told her when the wind shifted he could smell something else in the bay besides rot and the ghosts of old chains. He thought he could smell a continent. If he was honest, he had begun to love the idea of the alliance before he had begun to love anything else about the city. That was a dangerous order for love. He had always been poor at safe orders. He found himself, one warm noon, telling Missandei a story about a woman he had once loved in Volantis who had sworn she could tell if it would rain by the way her ankles ached. She would wake before dawn rubbing them, he said. She said the ache had a clarity, not pain exactly, more like a warning one chooses to admire. And did it rain? Missandei asked. Half the time, he said. But she was more right when she said she would love me for exactly a year and no more. He grinned without sadness. She had a talent for finishing things when they were complete instead of when they were broken. The Queen tries to do that, Missandei said in a faint voice. She has very little that is complete. Help her finish something, he said. Help her finish the day. There are too many hours in it, she whispered, and he did not say the thing that rose to his tongue, which was that there were not enough. Ser Barristan came to him the following day with a look Oberyn had not seen on his face before. It was not fear. It was not anger. It was calculation wrapped in a kind of reluctant hope. The Queen is considering sending ships to fetch grain, he said. There are men who will gladly sell it. There are men who will take her coin and sell her heir where they have left holes in their sacks. There are men who will do both. None of them will call it theft, Oberyn said. They will call it the market. She asks whether Dorne has warehouses that could be leaned upon. We have warehouses, he said. We have few ships. He let a smile turn the corner of his mouth up. But we have friends who owe us sums they pretend are small. There are men who would be pleased to be compelled by the Prince of Dorne to be useful to a queen whose name they cannot yet spell without discomfort. Barristan nodded. She asked me to tell you something else, he said. The way she said it made me think she did not want to say it. That must have been a new experience for her, Oberyn said, still smiling. Barristan's smile was a private thing for a moment. She asks whether you would consider remaining long enough to see if any of what we are trying works. Is that an invitation? Oberyn asked. He wanted to make a joke. He did not. It is, Barristan said. It is also a request. Oberyn looked out at the city. The light lay upon it like a benediction that did not ask to be believed. He felt Dorn behind his left shoulder, a hot palm. He felt Illyria's laugh in the bones of his ear. He felt Doran's patient caution in the muscle of his neck. He felt all of those things, and he felt the pull of this girl and her dragons and her foolish, gorgeous attempt to teach a city to breathe without a master counting its heartbeats. He did not think he could teach her how to be a queen. He was not even sure that was a thing a person could learn. He could, perhaps, help her remain a person while she tried. Tell her yes, he said. Tell her she chooses when the yes ends. He expected, foolishly, that this yes would ease him. It did not. It sharpened him. He found he moved through the city with something like a knife inside him. Not killing, only cutting the seams of bags to test whether they truly held grain. He made enemies not by striking them but by failing to pretend he did not see them. He collected stories and carried them to Daenerys like a fisherman bringing a day's catch to a woman who had never learned to clean fish but had learned to cook them well. He watched her grow better at asking questions and worse at sleeping. He watched her grow more stubborn at ignoring her stubbornness. He also watched her eat a pomegranate and lick her fingers and glance up at the dragon's shadow, and he felt in himself an ache that was not entirely political. It was ordinary and human and inconvenient. He did not confess it to anyone. He let it live in him as one lets live a thorn beneath the skin when it is too deep to dig out without a knife and one is not sure one wants one's own blood all over one's hands. On a night when rain had come, finally, thudding on the flat roofs and fat drops that made a sound like someone gently dropping handfuls of beans on a table, he stood with her under the overhang and watched the streets go dark and the water run brown and clean by turns. The city seemed to inhale and sigh. "There is a word in my tongue," he said, "for the smell of dust when rain hits it. Petrichor is the closest in the trade language, but ours is more intimate. It means the scent of a promise kept by accident." "What is the word?" she asked softly. "Sar," he said. He breathed it into the damp air and the air seemed, for an instant, to hold it as if it might be a bird it could fold into. "When I was a child, we would run outside at the first drop so the scent would wrap around us. Then our mothers would shout and we would run back in, laughing and furious. I did not have that," she said in the tone of someone who prefers stating fact to seek pity. "You have other things," he said. "You have dragons." She huffed a small laugh. "I would trade a dragon for a mother shouting at me to come in out of the rain." "You would not," he said, and then, because the rain made it easier to speak truths, he added, "But you would trade many things for a day in which your first choice did not carry the weight of 3,000 men eating." "Yes," she said, with a weariness that was not self-pity but the admission of a runner to another runner that he is tired and will run anyway. He stood close enough for their shoulders to almost brush and made no movement toward her that would be called a touch. The rain smelled like hope breaking a little. Down in the street, someone began to sing again. A different song about a woman who had owned no shoes and had learned to walk without cutting her feet. The voice was lower and rougher than before, but it had a kindness that felt like water poured carefully. "I will send a letter west," he said, "and ships will come, and men will complain to other men with oil on their beards that this is an outrage and it will not matter. I will send a letter east," she said, "and no one will answer and it will matter. It will be an outrage," he said. "I am tired of indignation," she said fiercely. "I want bread." "Bread is always political," he said, "even in a house with only 2 people in it. Then I am a politician whether I like it or not." "You always were," he said. She turned her head and looked up at him with a frankness that would have been naive in someone else. "Will you keep me from doing something unforgivable?" she asked. "Will you try?" "Yes," he said. He meant it like a vow. He did not add, "if I can." He did not need to. They were both smart enough to hear it. He left her then to the rain and to herself because there are hours when people need to stand alone in weather and decide who they are in it. He went to his bed and lay awake for a long time with the crack of lightning counting out the distance of a storm and Illyria's name like a small stone in his mouth that he did not swallow. Morning brought small news dressed as large, as mornings in cities often do. A man had been found with a bronze feather in his mouth. Another man had paid twice for the same barrel of wheat and had grown violent when it did not turn into 2 barrels by argument. A woman had discovered that she could tell her neighbor that her neighbor's son had struck her boy and that the neighbor could not have someone else strike her in return to balance the accounts. It was a difficult revelation and made both women feel poor for an hour. Missandei wrote these things in her tablet and ran out of wax. "Give me more," she told the scribe with a calm that made the scribe move faster. "There is a boat," Grey Worm said softly. "A boat with a yellow sail that has stopped too much and too long in places where men are not supposed to stop. We caught boys carrying sacks from it to a man whose name is always different." "Bring me the boys," Daenerys said. "Only the oldest," Grey Worm said, and his face did not say the rest, but the rest sat in the room like an uninvited guest who would not be turned away. The smaller ones ran into the water. She closed her eyes. She opened them. "Bring me the oldest," she repeated. The boy stood in the hall with wet hair and stubbornness in his mouth. He did not look afraid. He looked ashamed in the particular way of children who have chosen a thing because their bodies were hungry and now must defend the choice as if it were a plan. Oberyn watched Daenerys weigh her words, the delicate balance of them evident in her lowered lashes. He could have spoken and did not. This was not his hour to speak. "Tell me your name," she said. The boy hesitated, then chose a name. It was likely not his. She accepted it with a nod that accepted also the boy's right to a private self. "Why are you carrying sacks?" she asked. "Because it is work," the boy said, aggressive. "Work is not always virtue," she said. "Sometimes it is a knife. It is a knife in a hand that holds it," the boy said doggedly. He glanced at Grey Worm and found nothing there to help him. He glanced at Oberyn and found a smile that was not a rescue. He looked back at the queen. "It is a sack I can lift." I lifted it. "What was in it?" "Bread," he said. He did not blink. "Would you bring me the next sack?" she asked at last. The boy frowned, not understanding. "If the men tell you to carry a sack from that boat to that man with the different name," she clarified, "will you bring it to me instead? And we will pay you for your work. More than he does." The boy stared. No one in his short life had taught him that disobedience could be a job. He nodded and then shook his head as if to dislodge an insect. "He will beat me," he said. "We will not let him," she said, and for once the "we" sounded like a country. Oberyn saw something move in the boy's posture then, the way a small plate of armor might be adjusted by a father's careful hands. It was hope with a harness. He felt in himself the ache of how small the victory was and how much it could be made to count. He thought of Valeria and of the taste of lime in the water and of bronze feathers and of letters that had crossed a sea and of the way a dragon's shadow could make pigeons forget themselves. In the next days, men began to understand that they could not set prices in rooms where the queen was not. They began to understand that some of the boys at the docks had become a new kind of guard with narrower shoulders and wider eyes. They began to whisper different names for the old wrongs, and the new names did not fit comfortably in their mouths. Oberyn watched these adjustments with a satisfaction he did not bother to conceal. When men noticed and accused him of being pleased, he said yes. There is no shame in being pleased when thieves miscount. He and Daenerys fell into a pattern of speech that had the shape of dance but the bones of labor. They disagreed and did not raise their voices. They agreed and did not celebrate louder than a question. They walked the city together sometimes in the hour when mothers called children from doorways, and if people recognized them, they practiced looking anyway. He told her stories and she told him fewer. He learned to listen in the spaces between her sentences. She learned to let him hear what she had not intended to say. One late afternoon, when the light had gone soft and the city's edges had been sanded by a haze that was neither smoke nor mist, he told her about the water gardens in Dorne, about the cooling pools and the shade that is not kind so much as instructed to be kind by architecture. He told her about the way children's voices sound when they echo against stone that has been told what music to keep. He told her about the shape a boy's mouth makes when he discovers he has learned to float and cannot decide whether this is a trick or a birth. She listened with a hunger that embarrassed him. "I have not had a house," she said in a voice that made the words not pity but fact, as she preferred. I have had tents and rooms and a palace built on men's backs. I have not had a house. Then come, he said, as if it were easy. He spread his hands. Let the sand teach you heat that sings instead of burns. Let my brother show you patience. Let my children tell you what your dragons are called when men are not watching. She laughed at that. And how will I do that? She asked. Shall I tie ropes to my dragons and have them pull me across the sea in a bath? You will go as queens go, he said. On ships, under a flag that will make some men smile and some men choke and some men pretend to be asleep. You will go with the air thick around you like a fruit that is not yet ripe enough to bite. And you will disembark and you will walk with your feet bare on Dorne's tiles, and the tiles will forgive you for making them hot. You speak as if it is done, she said, but her gaze had fallen inward to a place where maps fold. Nothing is done, he said. That is why we live. He did not press her. He did not need to. The idea had been planted. He could feel it take water from the very air. That night he lay awake and thought of the 1,000 difficulties. He thought of houses whose names were knives and roses and how they would arrange themselves at the smell of a dragon. He thought of how Doran would welcome a queen and how he would count his breaths while he did so. He thought of Valeria's face when she saw the girl. He thought of the weather on the narrow sea. He thought of ships that always looked smaller at a distance and were always smaller anyway. He was restless. He rose and dressed and walked the corridor with soft feet and went upward, always upward, to where the air thinned and cooled. The roof was a different country at night. The city was a velvet skirt thrown over 1,000 knees. He found her there, not sleeping, her hair undone. Her bare feet in a shallow basin of water a servant had likely dragged up panting. She did not look at him when he came to stand beside her. He did not speak. After a long minute, she said, If I go west, I will be burned and anointed and hated and praised. I will be made into a mirror. Some men will look into me to see their own faces and will like what they see and call it good. Some men will look and see a stranger and call it abomination. I will not be allowed to be hungry or to be tired or to be a woman whose teeth ache. I will be a day of the week. Why do it? He asked, not to dissuade her, but because the question ought to be placed like a cup between them and examined. Because there is a chair that kills the men who sit upon it, and it does not stop killing men as long as it is fed, she said. Because a girl should not be made into a mirror, but some are made into chains. Because I have walked in the east where men call me mother, and I would like to walk in the west where men call me something and do not know me, and I will teach them to call me by my name. He nodded. Then let us make a world where a dragon landing in a courtyard means dinner will be late, not that a city will die. Let us make a world where princes are men who do things rather than simply inherit words. Let us make a world where a boy with a rope learns to tie knots that hold boats instead of throats. She let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Let us, she said, as if it were as easy as bread. Bread is hard, he said again, which is why everyone wants it. They stood, the two of them, with the wind telling them the same old stories in a new order. The dragon slept on the warm stone, its breathing huge but regular, like the sea decided to take a nap on a roof. Gray light grew along the edges of things. The city would wake and begin its daily argument with itself. Oberyn felt in his chest the tug of 1,000 possible mornings. He watched her profile against the light and thought in a pang that men would make a god of that silhouette if they were allowed to. He hoped he would always be in rooms where he could remind her she was a woman first, and then if she wished, a queen. He had said yes. The yes would have children, as all yes do. He had no illusions that all the children would be beautiful. He had no illusions at all, and yet he did. He smiled at his own taste for contradictions. He liked them. They tasted like home. He could not bring Ilaria the rain or the smell of bronze warmed by sun then cooled by night, but he could bring her a story that would not keep, one that would change as soon as it was spoken. He could bring her the taste of a plan in its first mouthfuls. In the market that day, the sandal maker firmly fixed a new strap to Oberyn's left shoe while telling him about a rumor of 7 ships anchored beyond the headland where the water turned a different color if one poured wine into it. Oberyn listened and nodded and asked the right questions and paid in coin that did not shame either of them. He returned to the pyramid and found Missandei counting something with her mouth shut and her eyes open as if she were balancing birds on a wire. He met her gaze and she nodded once, tiny and decisive. He found Grey Worm drilling boys with ropes at their waists because ropes teach the body where to be balanced and where not. He found Daenerys in the court, listening to a woman with a metal pin in her hair tell her about a man who had come to ask for her hand in marriage and who had accepted her refusal with a look that promised something more. Daenerys listened and sent a pair of men to watch, and then looked over the room and found Oberyn's eye and held it for the length of one breath. When evening came, the sky decided to be the exact color of a bruise that had almost healed. Oberyn stood again on the roof and watched the horizon and thought of all the ways the world could split when a dragon's wing cut air, and when a ship's sail caught wind, and when a prince turned toward a queen and offered not his worship but his work. He heard, faint and impossible, the sound of water in the water gardens of Sunspear, and he imagined Illyria standing with her hands in a pool, lifting them and letting water leave her fingers in small chords, strings she could pluck that would produce a tune that only he would hear. He imagined her turning and smiling and pressing her forefinger to her lips to tell him without cruelty that the song would need to wait. He could wait. He could move. He could do both because he was weather and because she was dragonfire and because the world was sand, and together these things made a landscape that men would try to own and would fail. He tucked his left foot into the new strap, felt the steadiness it offered, and decided to walk.